Dot, 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 dot. Good morning, everybody. This is Grant from State of the Spark. Yes, it's Tuesday, continuation of the pattern interrupts, but that's quite all right because I'm here this morning. You're here this morning. Yesterday, we took the day off in a pattern interrupt, reminding ourselves to break the hypnotic rhythms that we've been so susceptible to. Today, it's Tuesday, and normally we skip Tuesday. Normally, I have coffee with James and we hang out and we skip Tuesdays. And so most of you won't even know to look for us today, but that's the continuation of the pattern interrupt. The pattern interrupt causes you to be on your toes. Kind of think of it like a CrossFit plyometric workout for your attention of whether or not you're getting other news and hopefully some good training and teaching from State of the Spark. So this morning, I'm super excited to talk very briefly about a topic that I think, not even a topic, a concept. We're just going to touch on the concept of one thing that we all have in common as it comes to the mission. We all have this same mission, and I want to be very clear about what it is and remind you that those around you, consciously or unconsciously, those around you are also pursuing this mission. So we're going to touch on that. But before that, of course, we've got other news, hopefully uplifting, interesting, useful news to make you a better, cosmopolitan citizen of the world. Better things to talk about around the water cooler and chat about. So let's touch on, before any of that, cup of gratitude. Starting your day with a warm cup of gratitude with me. Listen, I'm grateful for several things. Number one, I'm grateful for Jessica Ojeda's patience. Good morning, Dan Sampson. How are you doing this morning? Good to see you this morning, Dan. Boop, there we go. Boop, I was pointing right there. I should have been pointing right there. Boom. Dan's up and at 'em. And if you guys have not seen any of Dan's carpentry creations, you're missing out. And Dan, let us know where we can actually see some of the stuff you're working on. If anything is for sale yet, we'd love to actually check out what you're up to. I love good craft, and Dan's been working really hard creating some craft. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for Jessica Ojeda's patience. Yes, I have her swag, and it's been sitting here, and I just have not made time to drop it to her. Putting it in the mail seemed foolish, but I'm grateful for her patience, but it's here, and just in time for me to order our new proofs from the book, Top 100 Dream Igniter. This is the next edition, and that's going to be forthcoming. So that should be in soon, but I'm going to go ahead and drop that to her today. I'm grateful that there's creators like Dan Sampson in the world making awesome stuff, and I'm grateful for my habits. I don't know about you guys, but habits make all the difference, and I had been off of my journaling habit, and today I got back to journaling, got a lot of clarity. That's really good. So that's what I'm grateful for this morning. What are you grateful for? We're not sharing a cup of gratitude if you're not sharing what you're grateful for this morning. I'd love to hear what's got you grateful. And let's cover other news. Here we go. So yes, they found aliens on the International Space Station, and I'm not exaggerating. Here we go. I'm going to drop this right here. Boom. Microbes. Yeah, okay. It's not big greens or little grays, but it is microbes. And they are there. A team of researchers from both the United States and India actually discovered 4 different strains of bacteria discovered on the International Space Station. And this is kind of a big deal in general because the space station is supposed to be a clean environment. But what they found is of these 4 strains, three of these bacterial strains, 75% of the bacteria they found on the International Space Station is previously or currently unknown to scientists today. So they were living in different places on the International Space Station. One was found in an overhead panel. A second was found in the cupola, which is kind of like an extra module on the space station. A third was found on the surface of a dining table. No big surprise there that we found unknown bacteria on a dinner table. And the fourth was found in an old HEPA filter, returned to the United States in 2011. Boom. Brittany says, grateful for Napoleon Hill. I revised my definite chief aim this morning. Now, I'd like to hear that, Brittany. I've actually been going back to the oldies and goodies. I'm going back through Top 100. I'm sorry, the Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, as well as 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm going through both of those again anew And I was also feeling significantly urged to revise my definite chief aim. And for those who don't know, the definite chief aim that Brittany is talking about right here, it's not necessarily your mission, but it's your mission for now. Your definite chief aim should be something that is so specific, that has a completed deadline, a completed date, and this is something that you will garner all your resources, all your strength, all of your finances and your people around this one thing until it's complete. It's like treating an objective or a milestone as if it were the only thing in the universe for a time. And it's kind of like Pilgrim's Progress often described the pilgrim as having one eye on scripture and then one eye on the horizon, if you will, and kind of had like split vision. That's kind of how you treat a definite chief aim. You have your eyes on it, and this is like your purpose for living right now, but you always have your eye on the overarching mission, because each one of your definite chief aims, until they're completed, they are the center of your universe, the axis mundi, as we would say in some spiritual circles. But once you achieve it, it's a giant building block to your life's mission. So this is really important. And this is the actual thing that you have in your dream machine, in your morning mantras or your morning recitations of kind of what your power statements, all that sort of stuff is kind of all focused toward the definite chief aim until that thing is achieved. So good conviction this morning, Brittany. Thank you. That actually speaks to me in some of the stuff I was looking at earlier for sure. So the fourth bacteria on the International Space Station was actually found in an old HEPA filter, which is an air filter, and they found it back in 2011 and have taken this long to sequence the gene and actually add it to the animal kingdom hierarchy, I guess is what it is. So these are actually found to be good bacteria. They discovered that all of this bacteria is bacteria that's good for plants, and it often found in soils. And a quote from one of the researchers says, to grow plants in extreme places like space, where resources are minimal, isolation of novel or unique microbes that help promote plant growth under stressful conditions is essential. And so basically they're finding that though these are alien, basically previously undiscovered bacteria, they've actually found it's quite useful to help grow space plants. And so they're going to be experimenting and exploring more with that. If you want to see how we found aliens on space, there's your link right there. Here, let me drop it in the comments here so they have it. Boom. There's your link right there. And you're welcome for seeing aliens. So if anyone ever asks you, do aliens exist? You could say 100% for certain. We actually found some in the International Space Station. Okay, here we go. What happened to the grasshopper and Van Gogh's ointment? Oh. Yes, that's right. A curator of the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City, Missouri, actually found, here we go, boom, actually was staring quite closely at the Impressionists' painting and just studying the thickness of the painting and the strokes. And then they found something with a magnifying glass that they thought looked like the outline of a leaf. And as they looked closer, they realized this is a grasshopper, shell or exoskeleton or carcass. This is a grasshopper's carcass. So they looked closer at the painting known as Olive Trees by Van Gogh, painted in 1889 while he was at a mental health facility outside of Saint-Remy in the province. And he was there at the mental facility as his mental health was declining and was painting quite a bit. And apparently a grasshopper carcass fell into the paint and it just got included because he used a very thick paint style right into the painting. And in the link I'm about to provide, there's actually a PDF where you can actually zoom in and see this thing. And it's very interesting to see, man, if you want to prove the authenticity of a Van Gogh painting, it won't take much, but to actually look for the grasshopper in this one. Now, what I found interesting about this article wasn't so much the grasshopper. 1889 was the last year that Van Gogh was alive. He was at this mental health facility, and his brother requested that the institution's director give Van Gogh the freedom to paint outside, and that was good for his mental health. And they did that. And in the last year Van Gogh was alive, he painted 150 different paintings. 150. You heard that correctly. In the last year he was alive, Van Gogh painted 150 works. Now, whether or not he knew time was coming for him or whether or not he was just that prolific, I want to find out. But I thought it was rather impressive that a man in his last years of living could conjure up the reserve to dedicate himself to his mission and how he found freedom. And that was through painting. Let me give you that link real quick. I was very stirred by this, thinking, man, if I knew that this was my last year, would I write 150 books? Would I paint 150 Enso paintings? I don't know. What would you do if this was the last year you knew you were alive and the world was kind of collapsing around you and all you had left was your one thing, your hobby, your activities, your passions? How would you spend that last year? Interesting thought, and it's what really struck me in my journaling this morning, and it led me to this final thought for the day. And this final thought, like I said, is not even a lesson, but a concept that I just want to deposit into you and let you think about, and it's this. The mission that we all share. We all have a different calling, a different definite chief aim, as Brittany called out a moment ago. We know that Dan Sampson's out there working on carpentry. We know that Brittany is working on a brand new definite chief aim. And these things we could say are our missions. Mine would be writing and training. I want to be writing and training. I want to be writing and training. Now, I would also love to surf in between and catch a little sun. But if I could be writing and training people, and that was my main thing, that would be awesome. That would be a fantastic thing. We're not there yet. We're getting there. We're not there yet. But the thing that we all have in common, that's what we all have uniquely. Brittany's has a unique one. Marissa and I have a unique one. Marissa has a unique one, separate from me, and Dan Sampson has his. So when I talk about mission, oftentimes you think you have to synthesize that through the lens of your definite chief aim, which I would say is true. You do need to synthesize the things we teach on for what's relevant to you. Chew the meat and spit out the bones. But I will say this. This is the thing that I believe we all absolutely have in common that our mission actually is, and it's this. The mission is freedom. Yes, you can conjure images of Braveheart. Yes, you could conjure images of Scripture. The mission is freedom. Now, when you ask people, like, what are they passionate about? What's their mission? They'll often say, my kids. That's great. And it's definitely a moral superior high ground to be able to say, my kids. But I think more often than not, and though it is very true that kids are a mission, they could be a definite chief aim. I often challenge people, what's the mission? And in the case of kids, for example, when we talk about freedom, Brittany says, yes, the mission is freedom. We could say that kids are our focal point, but what do we want for our kids? We want freedom for our kids. And no, we're not talking about a Trump flag waving, banner waving, ethnocentric, American-centric, yay, it's all about our freedoms. No, if you actually read the freedoms in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution, those are privileges of living in this country. And those privileges could be taken away at any time, or they could be amended at any time. Freedom is something else. Freedom is something that's deep inside of you. I was reading the book this morning by Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'd love to read this section to you at some point. And it was Be Where You Are. Oh, it was Live Free Where You Are. And he was talking about his mode of breathing. And the mode of breathing was so centered that you finally land on the freedom to breathe. In fact, he was training this entire book. This book was written as a little booklet. It was written based on his teachings to people in prison. He was visiting prisoners in America. And I don't know if people know this, but Thich Nhat Hanh originally visited America to appeal to them so that they had met a Vietnamese person so that, yes, that we would quit bombing Vietnam. That's when he first made his way here. And he then made his way through our prisons to reach our prisoners for this idea that you can be free where you are. And quite often when I teach about goals, when I teach about ambition, we often start then living in the future or in the past. We start living in the future and we start thinking, okay, goals, goals, goals. And Brittany's definite chief aim, I'm going to live there because we want to visualize. We want to keep this picture in our mind all the time. And then suddenly, if we do this too much, or if we do this in a little bit the wrong way, we can suddenly wake up and find that we're not living in our body. And so it's good to re-anchor ourselves to the present moment because you can be free where you are. Each of our missions is about obtaining a feeling, maybe a certain amount of serotonin and oxytocin, a certain amount of endorphins to make us feel free. But we can control that feeling. We can stimulate that feeling. We can create that feeling for ourselves. And so I wanted to remind everyone today, what is the mission, everybody? Igniting lives of explosive significance. Of course it is. And why do I describe it that way? That's my window dressing for this mission called bringing freedom to people. Now, here's a sequence, though, and you got to be careful about the sequence of freedom. You could have a Christological version of freedom, and that's where you sacrifice your freedom for someone else's freedom. And there's a lot of noble stories about that. But I believe that the type of freedom that I'm talking about goes even deeper. I believe the type of freedom that I'm talking about is a freedom that you cannot give to anybody else. The type of freedom I'm talking about is a type of freedom that cannot be given to one another, but it can be demonstrated one to another. So the sequence is this. As you go out and pursue your mission, as we talk about it here quite often, basically the work you're going to put your hands to make sure that people are benefiting, that we're helping other people. So whether that's Dan Sampson creating furniture, whether that's us creating websites or me doing coaching and training and helping someone express themselves, helping me find my own voice and to help other people find theirs. It's all about the mission that we do is all about creating freedom. So the first stopping point on freedom is your internal freedom. Now, believe it or not, this is the hardest freedom to obtain, but it's the simplest. It's the most difficult to obtain, but it's the simplest. It's the least complex to obtain. Internal freedom, to be able to breathe. One of the mantras from Thich Nhat Hanh, he says, breathe and say the words in your mind. In, out. And then do this until you feel this. And then he says, breathe deep and slow. And then he says, breathe calm and breathe ease. And then he says this, and this is the greatest one. He says, breathe in, smile, and breathe in, release. And what do you release? You release fear. You release accepting resistance. Oftentimes, if something is resisting us, we want to go force with force. We want to put up our dukes and go hand on hand. And the more you fight something, the more you give it energy. It's like these substances we have now that if you touch nice and slow, it's soft, but if you hit it, it's hard. We have these materials coming out now for space that are very pliable, but if they impact, they harden. And the military uses these also as casts. But if we don't validate resistance by engaging with it, we can experience smile and release. What else do we release when we can breathe right where we're at? We release fear. We release social expectations. There's a lot of social expectations on you today, my friend. Whether it's you, and FOMO is partly FOMO. But FOMO is actually, and I don't necessarily like the term FOMO because oftentimes we say it's the fear of missing out. But I think there's got to be another FOMO. We've got to come up with another term, and it's the fear of being rejected for standing up for our internal mission. And when I say standing up, I don't mean we need to come against anyone, but we need to take our direction. We need to choose our course. We need to turn our rudder the direction that's on your heart, that you're convicted in your soul to pursue. And it might not, and quite frequently will not, be the same direction as other people. So the fear of missing out, I think, should also be reframed. And that's the fear of the distance that will come between us as we point our the prow of our ship in another direction. This is why I say internal freedom is, I think, the simplest but the hardest to obtain. Because quite often there's a feeling that overwhelms you when you pick a direction, no matter what society says. When Marissa and I finally got into our car back in 2012 to drive away from Lakeland for what we thought was the last time ever, to leave our friends for what we thought was the last time ever, and then deposit our things in Savannah, or in Hilton Head with Marissa's family at the time, and then move to the Dominican Republic. For all we knew, we left everything behind. And though there was a fear to that we might lose our audience, that we might lose our friends, we had accepted it. And that acceptance, though difficult, was such a freeing moment that it's different. When I talk about a type of freedom that I'm talking about is deeper than something you can give someone. It's only a type of freedom you can find. Now, do you have to get rid of your friends to feel this type of freedom? Of course not. But you do need to break some old patterns. You do need to break some internal mental habits. You do need to break off the ways that you've been distracting yourself from your mission. I think that you and I both know what we should be doing. And I was journaling this morning and I was reminded of something that I know I've been avoiding. Two things that I know that I have actively been avoiding for over a year. Hashtag COVID life. But I've let my mental discipline go from that regard. And if I were just being honest, that's true. But as soon as I accepted it and started thinking through the cost of stepping out for that thing, I did have some trepidation. I did have some fear. I did have some worry. But at the same time, I started experiencing a higher level of internal freedom than I've ever had before. In fact, I don't do this show when I'm not feeling an internal sense of freedom. I don't care what you think. Though I care what you think. I hope that I inspire you. I hope that I deposit something in you. I hope that I leave a legacy for you. And for those who check in later in the day, like Brock and Jessica, and those people or Katie Yates, those guys, those of you who follow later in the day, I hope this hits you right. I don't do this necessarily based on what you might think of me, but I do this for you. And that type of internal freedom, I won't do the show if it's not coming from that authentic place, if I'm not speaking from an authentic place, warts and all. And I hope you do the same thing in your work. I hope you do the same thing with your family, that you seek an internal freedom first. And I just wanted to pause on internal freedom because I don't think you can demonstrate. Again, I don't think you can give the type of freedom I'm talking about to other people. You can only live it and demonstrate it. So I believe it's so important that you take time for internal freedom. And you could have this in a prison cell. You could have this when you're winning the award of a lifetime. If I saw you win the award of a lifetime on TV, I hope I would see a cue in your eye that you could say, this is cool, but not nearly as cool as the internal freedom I'm experiencing. I'm free even from these accolades. If you can find a way to be free from imprisonment and the oppression of being in prison, I hope you can also find the freedom from the accolades and the oppression of accolades and still know yourself and still be centered. That's why I say your internal freedom is the least complex. It's the simplest, but it's the hardest because it's all here and it's all here. Get your heart game in alignment. The second one is quite simple, and I won't go into the rest of them, but the first one's the most important. But the second one, only when you have your internal freedom can you help others with theirs. This is finding your own voice to help others find theirs. This is you finding an internal place where you're free, man, and you're taking action on it, not just talking it. You're taking action on it. You're moving on it. And, the devil may care about the outcome, even of those closest to you, because it's those closest to you who love you, who worry about you, who are actually the biggest threat to your dreams. It's not the haters. Haters are obvious. It's those who love you and care about you and are kind and are loving, but are worriers and hold you back. Those are the toughest ones. So starting with your internal sense of freedom can be a radiating light and a demonstration. Marissa's doing this with hiking. Left and right, people come up to her and say, hey, I'm super inspired. Hey, I'm super inspired. You got to know that's difficult on Mr. Inspirer to people walk in, they glaze over me and they go right to Marissa and say, hey, I'm following your journeys. This is awesome. And that's a challenge to me, to step up. And Marissa, living her internal freedom, is doing this exact process where I am now diving deeper to express mine. Everyone has to put the mask on themselves first, just like an airplane, as it comes to freedom. So step one, your internal freedom. We spend a lot of time on that. Step two, only then can they experience their internal freedom. And you have no control over this. You don't have control over this. The only control you have over this is to live more of your freedom, to live more of your voice. Can you think back to a time when you've done this and you know what I'm talking about? And if you have to think back and remind yourself, oh, I remember when I was really living my living out loud. I was living my loudest self, my wildest self, my most transparent self. Maybe you're not a loud person like me. Maybe you're a quiet person like Marissa, but she is still living her life out loud in her own way. That's the only mechanism you have to influence someone else's freedom, your own. To be able to smile and laugh in the face of resistance, and in the face of threats, in the face of challenges, to be able to hug someone and say, hey, I love you. Well, what about this? We'll take care of this. I'm good. Are you good? Are we good? Your internal freedom influences their internal freedom. Their internal freedom then cycles back and allows you to focus on your external freedoms. External freedoms can be handed to other people. External freedoms and privileges can be given to another. External freedoms are financial freedoms. They're time freedoms. They're location freedoms. They're three-dimensional space freedoms. They're health freedoms. They're relational freedoms. You can give that to people. That's external. So step one is your own internal freedom. Step two is how that influences others. And as the vibration in the room raises, as the abundance and the internal freedom of all the individuals in the room raises, then you start to see some external freedoms. You start to see economic sustainability in a small community when this happens, when that vibration happens, when that unity happens, when the community raises up. And you're seeing this in our small town right now in Lakeland. You're seeing a lot of this where a lot of people were doing some heart checks and getting themselves right. And now you're starting to see the external manifestation of that. And as your external freedoms start to abound, guess what? Their external freedoms start to abound. So there's this ping pong between you and others. You internally, them internally. And that creates a flow, an energetic flow. And that feeds your external freedoms. Finally, I'm getting some financial breakthroughs. Finally, I'm having some time to think. Finally, I'm having some peace of mind and making time for family. And then you'll see that they also are experiencing similar external freedoms. And you can imagine that those last three happen very quickly. Your internal freedom is the first one, but their internal freedom, your external freedom, their external freedom, it ping-pongs and picks up speed. Remember the mission. It is igniting lives of explosive significance, but yours has different words. Yours has a different energy and a different external wrapping. But at the heart of it all, you want to feel something. At the heart of it all, you want to feel free to make your own choices, free to dictate your own time. In fact, what you used to want for freedom, you might even have today. And in having it, you realize I'm still not free. And you're digging for new things to remove out of your life and new things to add to your life. This is the chase of freedom. I used to say I like business because it has an ever-moving goalpost. But I think I like freedom more because the game of moving the business goalpost gets old. The game of living free never gets old. Listen, I love you guys. If you need any support today, if you want to carry on this conversation, we're here for you. Visit us at the Goals and Gratitude group. Let's get this thing going. We are having an SEO workshop tomorrow night for Spark Sites. Check that out. I will be announcing the April workshops and pulling our team together for April workshops. Watch for that. Hold me accountable to it, folks, but let's carry on the conversation there. You can always check out State of the Spark for any of the latest and greatest tools, trainings, blog posts, whatever support you might need, whatever free tools you might need. You can always check there and check us out, as we're always going to be hoping to add more and more there. But no matter what you do today, remember the mission. Igniting lives of explosive significance, starting with your own.